Hello, everyone, and welcome to IFMA's PD webinar series. We are so glad to have you with us today for an exciting webinar. My name is Starlin, and I'm an account manager here at IFMA. Happy to introduce our webinar for today. While you are joining, please warm up your keyboards and let us know where you are joining from. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be sharing the recording as well as the slide deck with you after the presentation is done. Today's exciting webinar is going to be talking about how to protect your facility in a digital world. We have some really special guests with us from our strategic partner, Building Cybersecurity, as well as our very own Kim Jackson, our Executive Director of Business Development. Really excited to hear all of these incredible insights that they have today. But first, I'd like to introduce you to IFMA in case you aren't familiar with us. We are the International Facility Management Association. We are an international organization that supports the profession of facility management. We are made up of over 25,000 global members and are located in over 130 countries across the world. Our vision is to lead the future of the built environment to make the world a better place. What you do as a facility manager every single day makes your facility a better place, and in turn makes your company a better place as well as the world a better place. So what you do is very, very important, and we want to help support you do your job to the best of your ability. So we advance our collective knowledge, value, and growth to help advance your profession. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. We are celebrating Cybersecurity Awareness Month this month. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome Kim Jackson onto the screen with me. Hi, Kim. How are you today?
Hi, Starlin. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for that great introduction. As you said, this is our professional development webinar series, and we like to dive into different topics. So this month, we are going to be looking at building cybersecurity and bringing in our strategic partner. So if I can go ahead and bring the team in, Stacy, EJ, and Fred, glad to have you. We are talking about cybersecurity because it is Cybersecurity National Month, Awareness Month. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, Stacy, we love our partnership. Please share some information around building cybersecurity.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the ability to be here with other members of the Building Cybersecurity team. We have treasured the fact that we've had a partnership with IFMA for 2.5 years now, and it began as IFMA recognized the need to start raising education and awareness on inherent vulnerabilities for our operational technology, which EJ is going to talk to in a little bit. So our mission as a nonprofit is really about sustaining frameworks across multiple critical infrastructure. And the fact that we call it not just cybersecurity, but really about cyber safety. It's about business continuity. It's about recognizing that there is a difference between IT and OT. And so we see it as our role to partner with manufacturers, to provide frameworks and tools, to offer checklists and guidelines. So it's not just being aware of the threat and vulnerabilities, but it's really about looking ahead and advancing human safety in a smarter world. We're leveraging technology. There's a lot of discussion on AI, but if you're going to be connected, you need to be protected. And so within our membership, we have people that do cyber assessments, cyber commissioning. We are pushing forward on cyber certification. We're working on insurance incentives. We're looking at client risk assessments. So we're trying to give you the tools and the building blocks as facility managers to, first of all, understand that this is inherent within your responsibilities, but also to give you a roadmap and a path forward. I'd like to tie in EJ, who's one of the co-founders for BCS.
Yeah, when we first decided to build the nonprofit of Building Cyber, there's this significant gap in what people think of as cyber insurance or cyber safety is more on the IT side, not the physical systems. So, when you look at the properties you manage, there's a lot of technology going into what was traditional mechanical devices. Now those things are powered by small programs to run your building systems, your access control systems. And you guys having a role from a facility manager, not necessarily being the technical person, but understanding the role you play in making sure that those devices are protected. And what BCS has done is we've tried to build a playbook and a prescriptive approach, to help organizations go down the cybersecurity journey. Whether you're very new to this or very experienced, we have the tools and checklists to help you further that protection.
And I want to say too, just to add to that, the reason for our partnership, IFMA also recognizes that cybersecurity can often be seen as only IT. And on the facility side, why would facility managers need to play a role? So we've talked before as a group about its operational resilience. These are systems that they're smart systems, and they have vulnerabilities. If they're told to close out and to shut down, that impacts the facility, it impacts the people in that facility. And who do people then turn and look at? They look at the facility manager. What's going on? How do we get everything back up and running? So, for those of you who are joined us and that you're listening and you watch this, please know you have a very important role to play. And as we share more information today, I think you'll understand why we are talking together, why we have information. And yes, there's going to be additional knowledge and training available. So we'll go ahead and continue with our conversation and move forward. EJ, I would love for you to kind of explain the digital challenge for us.
Yeah, if you look today, the operational efficiency, you hear buzzwords like connected buildings, smart buildings. What does that all mean? I mean, to me, a smart building is really the ability for one functional system within that building to talk to another functional system and drive efficiency and drive automation, right? You hear these terms like IT versus OT. What does that really mean? Like, from our building cybersecurity point of view, operational technology is really the software systems that are embedded within the physical systems that run your building. So think of an energy management or an HVAC system. Now you have, little programs that run and determine what zone is open, what is closed, you know, access control systems, how people get access in a building, how a door is opened, how a door is closed. So there's, multiple systems that are now operational technology systems that are driven by software. That software has to be protected, but it's protected in a different way than IT systems are protected. Because today, when you look at a cyber protection on a data system, you can run little agents just to, you know, understand whether that has any vulnerabilities. Most building engineers will not let you touch any of the systems. So there's a lot more care and feeding to how you think about protecting these OT systems. And they're not going away, right? You hear the buzzword of AI and how that drives. AI is really just taking the data out of a building and being able to automate that. Most people don't understand. If you look at a 500,000 square foot building, there's somewhere between 20 gigabytes of data that get created. Well, what does that mean? That's roughly, 3 to 4 million pages of information created every month. No one's looking at that data. You need AI and you need the automation to use that data to drive the appropriate actions of turning on and turning off different set points within that building, and then also how that information gets shared not only in the building, but as we look at especially ESG requirements and GRISB and other sustainable information, all of that has to be pulled out. All of that has to be protected at the fundamental level. We also just think about it, as Stacy mentioned, we don't think about it from a cybersecurity perspective. We think it as a cyber safety. As I told the story at the IFMA World Workplace, last year was the first time a cyber attack actually caused a death. There was an attack in a hospital system that took down some of the systems in Germany, and a patient died, right? So now we're looking at this from a cyber safety and how it impacts the folks coming into these buildings.
I think that's the critical part, and I know Fred, you have some stories too you'll be sharing. It is about the well-being and the health and safety of people utilizing the facilities, and how the operational technology can be utilized to cause harm. When we think of data breaches, we think of confidentiality, financial information, privacy. But when we're talking operational technology or OT, this is where it's the people, and it's the facility managers and those teams that take care of the people. So this is where it's directly tied together. And it's a shame, but I'm concerned that, you know, to understand the difference between IT and OT, it also is important to understand the impact when something does happen.
And how to respond, and we'll go through that as well. Like, right, what are the
Yes,
actions that people can take when something happens?
exactly. And as we move forward, now here's the problem. So, Stacy, if you want to start this, and then I know that the team has some additional details to share.
Absolutely. So as you have everything connected, right, you're looking at the triple bottom line. You're looking at improved sustainability or decreased grid reliance. You're looking at improved asset performance and business continuity, and you're looking at enhanced resilience. But the problem is, as you go through, most of our facilities are decades old. 30, 40, 50 years or more. And over that time, there have been multiple networks and many vendors that are coming in, and with layer upon layer upon layer. And then this creates fragmentation. There are challenges with connectivity. There are challenges with utilization and reliance on cloud-based services. The fact that many managed services providers dial in remotely and have access, and what happens when you change out those vendors. So how to look at those areas of security. We also talked within the aging infrastructure. You look at IT systems, and those are refreshed on a regular basis. Even with our phones do automatic pushes in terms of getting patches and updates and things like that. We don't have that for our facility systems. And so as you're looking at these challenges, you've got gaps, you've got aging infrastructure, you've got inefficient networks, and you have more and more that is being layered in a Band-Aid approach that creates greater risk. And then,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, please.
yeah. I was going to say, there's also an organizational challenge,
Yes.
right? Because I call this the Charlie in the box, right? Where it's the redheaded stepchild. Any of the technology tied to the building systems don't necessarily fall under the purview of the IT's cybersecurity team, right? It typically falls to the network engineer or the building engineer in that building, right? So there's this huge skills gap that it needs to be, closed.
Fred, I saw you nodding when EJ started kind of talking about where it falls under, and maybe IT's not necessarily brought it into their scope. What have you seen as being an issue in some of the problems here?
How many hours we got? Just kidding. No, not really. Um, so listening to EJ, yeah, I'm nodding my head because even today I'm somewhere. Um, IT has wanted to remain, in some cases, oblivious to what's underneath, right? So you tend to run into situations where working the service provider working with facility folks says, okay, we need to be able to get you set up to be able to connect to these things all remotely, and we can help you. And IT's never really involved in that conversation. So what happens is, and just for those that may or may not know, I used to be a systems integrator. So I come from a point of experience is we would do our dead level best to give them those accesses. But we didn't follow any, IT best practices. So what's resulted is you have, I can't tell you the number of times have people tell me, well, we're not connected, we're not exposed, and then I go find them. But it's not a bad intent. In fact, if anything, as a system integrator, we want to make serviceability easy for the asset owner. So as a result, we created a lot of these gaps.
Well, and I'll just fold in one more thing, Kim, and that is there's an assumption on the part of many facility managers that their CIO or their IT team has it. And the answer is they don't. And I think, in all of my conversations and personal experience, often the IT and facility management teams don't talk regularly. And so that's a huge gap there. And so one of the things that BCS is trying to do is, as we see a convergence of the IT and the OT requirements, is to think through how to have the right discussions on who owns this and who does not. Do you have a plan? How are you going to think about prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery? So these are the things that we'll talk about a little bit more on the balance of the hour, but we certainly welcome any outreach and engagement to discuss this further.
And I I think here the problem too is there's turnover, right? There's going to be churn at different organizations. And so your IT team eventually may not be the IT team that you had 5 years ago when some of these integrations were put in. And they're going to assume that a due diligence was done and may not go back and look. So they're
Yeah.
saying, we don't have any openings. We're good. We're solid. Everything's fine. The FM at the same time may not have realized at that point, because we've learned so much and technology has evolved at such a rapid pace that they don't understand that there are some vulnerabilities. So I'm really looking forward to our next areas of conversation, because I think it's not a oh, everything is lost. It's a, you need to be aware of it and do what facility managers do every day and find your solution. And we're going to help you with that. So as we move into that next slide, we have, what does this impact have? And I think on this one, EJ, you can go into what we're seeing happening over the past few years.
Yeah, I was actually on the team originally to build the cybersecurity network for the city of New York, right? And in 5 years ago, we would have somewhere near 1,000 attacks a day. It's now over 1 million attacks a day just on the agencies of New York City alone, right? And then obviously that you have NYCHA, you have a ton of building facilities that are a part of that, right? So the cost of that single breach has significantly increased over the years, and now it's up to, over $5 million for one incident. Very practical example today, Land Rover. It was announced this morning, the breach to Land Rover will cost them $1.4 billion, and they did not have the appropriate insurance coverage in place. So they're going to have to ride the full freight of that cost.
And some may not be aware of what happens. So just do a real quick highlight.
Yeah. So there was a breach within Land Rover, the car production company. It's taken down all of their facilities for the last month. They're, no one's been able to come into work. None of the production facilities have worked. So what started as an IT attack, it actually ended up affecting all of the operational systems within that corporation, right? So, I have a good buddy that's got one. They took it in, and it's like they couldn't even service it, because access to any of the systems that because most cars today are computers on wheels. So they couldn't even tie into it. So it's just has this ripple effect, not only from just what they can't produce for new vehicles, but they're supporting the thousands and millions of customers that are out there today.
It's eye-opening. And if we go into the next slide, so that's the cost of a single data breach. How many attacks are we having?
Yeah, and this is just on critical infrastructure. So you have almost 90,000 attacks a day on different critical infrastructure. And if you look, this buzzword of artificial intelligence, AI, you know, it's used for good and it's used for evil, right? So the ability for AI to drive additional hacking technologies and scale that, puts us on the wrong side of the ledger for this, right? And this is just continuing to increase. And we'll go through some of the things in the next couple of slides it becomes overwhelming, but what are the steps you take to at least start your journey to think about it?
Hey, I'm going to weigh in with another example. I know we've got a lot of global representation here, but in the US, in Las Vegas, 2 casinos were targeted, and one was Caesar's Palace and one was MGM Grand. As we're seeing more, unfortunately, there are bad actors that look at this as ransomware as a service. They show up every day and they try and take things down. And so it was Caesars decided to negotiate with them, and it went from, I think, 30 million to, I think, something like 15. And but MGM said, nope, we're not going to negotiate with you, took them down, and it converted into on the OT side, all of their access control cards. So the access control cards are used for the slot machines, for the rooms, for everything. And they were essentially, it was, I think, initially $1.8 million a day, but it took them, what, EJ, like well over 30 to 45 days to try and get things back up and running. So you look at the potential as we have connected environments. This is what we're just trying to underscore, is that you must be protected, because unfortunately the bad actors are getting more and more creative, and we need to stay ahead of that.
Exactly right. And as we continue and we look forward, Fred, can you take us through this?
Sure. So I want to set the stage a little bit because EJ and Stacy said something. When we're talking about ransomware, a lot of these guys are just business guys. I mean, they're just unethical business guys, but they're business guys. So when they send out all these, they're trying to catch you in a ransomware situation. They don't want to get too much attention, because if they get too much attention, then they become the targets of federal agencies, right? So there's this particular one right here. There was a group called DarkSide, and if most of you may or may not have heard about the Colonial Pipeline situation, where nobody on the East Coast of the United States could get gas. And the reason I bring that up is this is one of the situations where it went, oops, we hit the wrong people. Because what happened is bad guys will turn on each other. So when the FBI started trying to figure out who this was, check this out. I spent time on the dark web. These guys have websites. They have customer service. They'll build you whatever you want. And DarkSide used to have an employee that went to work for one of these other companies. And when all this went down, the other bad guys said, hey, look, we'll give him up. We know how to get into their system. And they were able to recover some of the money. Okay, the reason I want to tell you that, because this is really important on this next slide. Go back one more. Prior to the Colonial Pipeline, DarkSide found Boston Children's Hospital. Well, they said, wait a minute, we don't want to have anything to do with this because this would draw too much attention, right? They reached out to E&E Systems, who is a system integrator. And you can look this up. This is public knowledge. And E&E Systems' response was, there's not a problem. So the bad guys contacted databreaches.net, which is, you can look them up, their website that talks about breaches. And they said, okay, we don't know if this is legit or not. So they hired their own cybersecurity researcher and found out, yes, Boston Children's Hospital is exposed. Well, the FBI then got involved, and it's still questionable whether or not they fixed it. But now let's go to the next slide. So me being me, just started looking around for E&E Systems out there. And you see those names? Those were easy. I found those within 5-10 minutes. The thing about it is, having been a system integrator, I can tell you that if I used a username and password here, I also used it there. So luckily, DarkSide was the good bad guys and didn't go after anything. But this is typical for any system integrator. And I get it. There's an economical reason why we did that, because we could hire and fire people and we didn't have to keep creating new username and passwords. So as a company, we would have a single username and password. So if I can get in this system, I can get in that system. So,
and underscore the fact that as you hire and fire people, those people who are fired also have all the usernames and passwords.
yeah, and I'm not going to get into it now, but I've got a story about that where somebody was fired within 24 hours. They wrecked a system. So
It's food for thought, and you have a common integrator, and you've got bad actors out there, and they all have their own agendas for what they're trying to do. And what you said, Fred, about not wanting to get too much attention, this is why I believe it's been mandated now that companies have to report when they've had a
yes,
breach, whereas before they didn't unless it was, some serious money. But even then, if let's say in the US the government comes in, the FBI comes in to research it, they're not trying to get the money back. They're wanting to find the bad actors so they can prevent future breaches. But you've got all of these guys out there that are putting their knowledge to not so good uses, and then it propagates, and it just continues and spreads.
if I can throw this in, just to put things in perspective, when you watch a movie and there's a cyber hacker and they're doing all this stuff, those days are pretty much, well, they didn't really ever exist. But any one of us on this call, if you know how to get on the dark web, you can go to a marketplace and you can tell, you can hire somebody to write whatever you want. Or there's also a little software that we can download that you just put in there. I want to be able to access the camera. I want to get a keylogger. I want to do this. I want to do that. And you pay $50 and you got that, and you can send it to somebody and get into their system and watch them and see everything they type. And you don't even have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and as part of, you look at the operational technology, we were a part of a hack the airport situation, and Fred found an airport that had their runway lights exposed.
And also mountains with their obstruction avoidance system. So I could go in and turn those off, and I shudder at what would have happened.
Well, let's continue on because we've got more information. But
I want to let people know, like, there's a positive. We spent the
there is
first
a positive
with a little bit of a dire situation, but now here's the positive to try and figure out how we can help.
I think we might have had a couple more slides, Leslie. Yes, I think there were a couple more slides, Leslie, if we can bring that back up. If we can go to the next one. I think this is another issue that we were going to just take a look at. So, Fred or EJ?
Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
This was one I was directly involved with. And the reason this is up here, this was no bad guy attack, okay? But people will put contracts in place that state certain things, but nobody is owning making sure that that's done. So in this particular case, the vendor was supposed to have a machine, a server on the shelf, and they were supposed to be making updated backups. This was an access control system that was tied into the elevator. So you couldn't get off on certain floors unless, you had a badge, whatever. Well, they called the vendor and said, hey, our machine just died. And so the vendor said, okay, we'll order a machine. And they said, whoa, you're supposed to have one. I said, we don't. So they got their IT department to build up one, who they're like, what? They're not even involved. They built them one up. So they called the vendor in to put the backup in. And this was in 2000. What was it? I think it was 2020, 21. The copy they brought in, the last backup they made was in October of 2006. So a lot had been changed. And so They put the backup in, but they still had days and days of work to get everything back up. So the company had to hire security guards to stand on those floors and say, nope, you can't get off here. But
Wow.
that is typical, because even if you write the language in, if you're not due diligent on following and making sure that the vendor is doing what they're supposed to do, you run into this situation.
So I want those who are watching to just be thinking of a regular building, with, and it could be in any industry. There are elevators that go to certain floors that nobody can access but key personnel. And this is a very simple problem. A piece of equipment failed. The vendor was supposed to have a backup. It's not there, but you've got potentially executives, very sensitive information. And now, as the facility manager, you're going to have to help solve this problem and put the appropriate personnel there to prevent people accessing areas that they shouldn't. Whether you're an airport, research and development, a corporate facility, legal facility, with all of the different files that cannot be accessed, it can become a logistical nightmare. So it's important to know what's in your building, what's running it, and make sure that if you do have external vendors, your contractors, that you're taking a look and that they're doing what they're supposed to do. I think we've got one more slide of different things that could cause problems and that are our challenge. If we could go to the next one. Okay, we're not. We're going to pause here. We're going to take the slides off. And I have a question for the panel. And really what we're looking at is we've seen the reasons why things can go wrong. We've taken a peek at, personnel changes, new technology, IT not putting the same level of oversight on operational technology. We're really learning now those vulnerabilities. So how do you respond? And what would be your advice for facilities teams in these situations? And EJ, if you'd like to kick us off, but I want everybody to just give us some ideas.
Yeah, so part and parcel of us building the building cyber organization, there has to be a market-based incentive. So what's the most important thing around this is it's insurance, right? Because you can either accept, mitigate, or transfer that risk of insurance, right? So from a facility manager's perspective, understanding what coverage is in place for these different scenarios is absolutely key, right? And then understanding, so today, from a cyber insurance perspective, there's really two pieces, and I know we're going to pull up a slide, but how you respond is going to be directly proportionate to what your cyber insurance tells you to respond, right? Because oftentimes now those policies, especially, the larger policies, they make sure that they're the first call before you even do anything from an instant response. So understanding within your organization what is the protocol of what you should do if something happens is really key.
So
Stays.
I think, and I think even before that, all FMs are, it's in your DNA to be thinking about all hazard resilience, right? Thinking about natural disasters, or God forbid, like an active shooter, or, all of these things. You go through all these scenarios, but not often do organizations think about a cyber attack and have that baked in terms of their safe plan of action. What do you do? First of all, a lot of people don't even recognize that it was a cyber attack and why things are going down. And then also, do you evacuate the building? Have they hit your elevators? Have they hit the escalators? And so first thought is the safety of your occupants, and then also thinking about business continuity. So what is that sense of immediacy? How do you think about locking down your information? How do you communicate? Like EJ, you were talking about one of your clients.
Yeah,
Share
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. We did a tabletop exercise where we threw different scenarios, and the team was all happy with how they've built a complete communications plan. They had different email lists for, this severity of an attack, this type of thing. And then we asked the question, well, your email's down. how do you communicate? Like, do you have a secondary approach where you have private email addresses of the key personnel? Do you have text lists where you can get to people with cell phones in a different way? So thinking through the different paths that you can take to communicate if something goes down is absolutely critical. And then who's going to say what to whom? So we did this exercise, and the middle tier management was like, we're going to do this thing. The senior executives like, nope, my first call's to the chairman of my board and my biggest customer. I don't know the answer or what the impact is, but I'm at least going to give him a heads up that something's wrong here. So understanding and making sure you have a communications plan of attack of how you're going to do it for each organizational level as well.
And Fred, I'll have you tie in real quick on a situation that you experienced as you were trying to remediate it, where they didn't realize that things do not get better with age. So when the building engineer got a notification, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay. Help me a little bit because I got a lot of.
Well,
think,
this one was
thinking of one
specifically when it brought down the chillers, and because with supply chains, they were not able to start up again for something like 92 days. It was terrible.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's hard to keep short, but I will do my best. But so a guy clicked an email on the head end. The head end is the thing that runs the building. Okay. He clicked an email that it looked like it came from one of the guys that he worked with, and it said, "Hey man, take a look at these pictures I took at the lake." He clicked the link and didn't go anywhere. So a little bit later, the guy that he thought it came from comes walking through, and he said, "Hey man, I couldn't see the picture you sent." He said, "I didn't send you any pictures." And so there was an aha moment there, and they said, "Uh-oh, this could be bad. Let's back up the machine." Well, what happens when you back up a machine that something like that happened? There's a good chance you're going to back up the bad stuff. Well, later on in the day, they got the ransomware set off, locked them all up. They called the service provider. Service provider said, "Okay, well, we're going to bring you a brand new machine." They reinstalled the bad backup, and everything looked fine. The next morning, they came in, the building was hot. They started investigating. They had 3 controllers that were bricks. You couldn't use them anymore. There were variable frequency drives that drive the pumps, and they were burned up. The pumps had suffered cavitation, and there was pitting inside of there. And then they weren't sure about the chillers. So and this was pre-COVID, the response is to get portable cooling. When no rental place has got 100 portable coolers. So they're just looking everywhere. The drives are not on the shelf. The controllers have to be ordered. There's lead time to everything. The long and short of it is 92 days later, they were finally fully back online from one email. But I got to throw this one in because this is about process. What you were saying earlier is earlier in my career, when I was doing an assessment, I was walking through a parking garage, and I said, "Well, aren't we going to check the parking vendor?" "Oh, well, they're not connected to our network." And I said, "Yeah, but your name's on the building." And they said, No. 2 weeks later, I met that same guy in another building, and he said, "You remember the parking vendor you asked me about?" I said, "Sure do." He said, "Well, apparently they had put a wireless access point in their little network, and somebody got in and printed, 'There's a bomb in the building.'" Okay, there's a thing called response paralysis. The guy's like, "Well, what do we do?" And so he thought his buddy did it. His buddy comes in. He said, "I didn't do it." "Well, what do we do?" An hour later, they finally talked. They talked to their boss. He's like, "I don't know what to do," because there was no procedures in place. Finally, they let the building manager know. This was 2.5, 3 hours after they first got it. They dumped the building, and it's not like on TV, the bomb squad comes in, an hour later, everybody goes inside. It took them 2 days to clear the building from a printer that was not connected to anything.
And I
Yes.
think
So Kim, we need to have, we encourage everybody to have a plan, to set processes, and
Mhm.
EJ's going to talk a little bit about that in our 16-point checklist.
Yeah, I think in the response, do you know who you're supposed to reach out to? Because I'm willing to bet there's some really clear, defined processes and steps for severe weather, for almost anything that you can think of that would be an external force on the building, except for if something goes wrong internally and the building becomes uninhabitable, or in this case with the bomb threat. So let's go ahead and Leslie, we're going to bring those slides back up. And EJ, you had started to talk with us about insurance, and here's your approach to what's the impact of this and what FMs need to know.
Yeah, my biggest homework assignment for the FM community here is go read the fine print of what they have in their policy. So traditionally, when you think of insurance policies around cyber, there's cyber insurance that covers the organization and the IT side, so data theft and data corruption and breaches, right? The other side, which is probably more important from the facility managers, is the whole property and casualty of protecting that physical asset, right? Fire, flood, all of those things, right? So one of the suggestions I would have is go talk to either your broker or your risk compliance officer internally and ask this simple question. If my building management system, my access control system was hacked, what does that mean? Is that covered under our current business interruption, type of insurance? So really understand the exclusions and gaps, and then also make sure you understand how that trickles down to your vendors. Make sure your vendors have the appropriate policies and things in place to protect you guys as they're doing work in these facilities, right? And today that's lost. That's starting to become an issue where we're starting to see building owners push that back on, especially the larger players like a CBRE or JLL, that they want them to assume that risk, and then they then push that risk down to any of the third party vendors. But understanding how that works for your particular organization is really, really key. And as we talked about the procedures, most times today, the first call you need to make is to your insurance team, because you may be covered from an incident response perspective. They have a whole bunch of cyber experts on standby to come in an incident response, but understanding how you access them and where you use them is absolutely key to ensure that they'll pay out on the claim. Right. We work very closely with the Aons of the world, the brokers, and you'll go down the list and think about this from a home insurance policy, right? Yeah, I have a video surveillance system, I have a dog, that's my home, right? Something happens, you may not be protected because they'll come back and check to make sure that those policies, procedures, or systems that you said were in place are not actually in place. So you may not get covered. And it'll be interesting just looking at Land Rover. I'll dig in and see what happened to them. But here they announced this morning they have no coverage on a $1.4 billion claim, right?
And then who's ultimately going to be held accountable? And that's, the finger pointing is going to happen. EJ, what you said about reading the material, take it upon yourself, because there may be some assumptions being made by those people who agreed to the policy, that of course the facility has X, Y, and Z in here. If we've got surveillance, that IT is actively looking at that all of the entry points. But if there's a piece of equipment put in and it's not protected and it's not inventoried and included in that, but that's how they got in, will that null and void your insurance policy? And they go, sorry, but you're not covered. And then what happens?
Kim, and add to the fact on managed services providers, whether you are the MSP or whether you hire the MSP, if something happens as a result. So in the US, if you go back 10 years, there was a situation with Target, a major store. And it was the HVAC provider that brought in a USB stick and plugged it in that had malware that went from the HVAC through the systems into their IT capacities, where they were able to access credit card information and a lot of other sensitive information. So who's liable for that, right?
Mm.
And going back and looking at your contracts on liabilities, on what happens, if an MSP identifies something, what happens if you as the FM identify something. There needs to be a plan of action so it prevents intransigence and it gives you the ability to both respond and recover quickly.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, and it makes me think of if you get into an accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Having but it wasn't my fault, and pointing the finger at somebody else, it doesn't solve the issue. You're still without a vehicle. You could be injured. Your facility could still be injured. So having the moral ground to say, well, it's our contractor's fault. Um, Chances are, if you're talking about 1.4 billion or however much it is, that contractor is not going to be able to. So, okay, so you put your contractor out of business, but you're still suffering the consequences. So I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, I think is
Mm-hmm.
the old saying.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead. Let's look at this next slide as we move toward what can you be doing? And this is where IFMA and Building Cyber Security really came together, Stacy, to put some great training together from a facilities perspective. So if you want to just share what we did to come up with this course material.
Yes, exactly. So you're able to scan the QR code in the bottom right. That will take you to what we call kind of our Cyber 101 course, an introduction to building cybersecurity for FMs, because we want to make this more approachable. So it helps talk about basic verbiage and concepts, and walks you through. So you don't have to be a cyber expert, but you have to understand what are the areas of vulnerability, what should you be aware of, and ask the right questions. There was an earlier folio that was a research paper that was put out there. We've also got podcasts in the knowledge library that walk through the 16 steps that EJ is going to highlight in a minute, and to think about ways that we can help with awareness and education. So we're doing webinars, we're doing podcasts, but this is a formalized instruction in partnership with IFMA's professional development. Highly recommend those who are interested to start that process of engagement, and it will be very, I think, informative as you embark down this journey.
Yeah, well, one extra point here. When you think about cybersecurity, it comes down to 3 points: people, process, and technology. And if you look at the banner on the bottom, a lot of my clients and facility managers are like, I don't have the money to put any of this stuff in. It's really not about money for the first phase of this, right? 80% of cyber attacks are caused by human error, and a vast majority of those are just they weren't meant to be done. It was just complete, not understanding what someone should do or not do. So, the first advice is just start to huddle from an organizational perspective and understand roles and responsibilities around this whole piece of it.
Agreed. And then as we go into the next one, I want to lean into what BCS has put together. So EJ, you want to share some information here?
Yeah. So, cybersecurity is really scary when you look at all of the standards, NIST, 62443, all of these things that make up this. So what we tried to do from an organization, and thanks a lot to Fred and other, domain experts, we spent a couple of years putting together a framework to take the component parts of all of these global standards and put together a profile very specific for commercial real estate. So we went through about 16 different building functional areas, HVACs, elevators, escalators, access controls, and said, hey, what's the minimum type of controls that we need to put in place to start to secure this. So the fundamental framework of BCS makes up about 150 controls. But what we did do is that we took those 150 controls and try to take them and put them in a 16-step playbook. So how do I start this, right? So the first thing within the playbook is having organizational support from a senior executive perspective. And the first thing I would say is, as Fred mentioned, the Colonial Pipeline incident, the lawsuits are now not only going against the organization, they're going after the executives. So the Colonial Pipeline CEO has 16 different class action suits against them. So, for the senior executives to make sure that they're protected, they need to be engaged in this. As one of the members of our team was a key player in the industrial control with ExxonMobil, he said, yeah, the senior executive that I recruited to be a part of it is the guy that has to get in front of the microphone when something goes really bad. Right. So making sure that, there's an organizational structure. And then, we mentioned the gap between OT and IT. I have a client that manages one of the largest real estate portfolios in the world, and she's the CIO. She never had responsibility for any of the building systems. About 6 months ago, she calls and goes, EJ, I need your help. I've now taken responsibility for all of the building systems from a CISO perspective, right? So understanding who owns those things. And then the only other step is the second step is understand what's in your building. The adage I say is you can't protect what you can't see. So, please look at, what systems are in place and, have that inventory list.
Absolutely. So I just want to remind everybody who's watching this, there's a QR code here. There's a lot of free information out there. We want to raise awareness of operational technology, the resilience. EJ, you had mentioned, who do you report up under? We at IFMA, we're seeing changing reporting structures. FM sometimes will report up to the CFO, but now we're seeing sometimes your chief human resource officer or your chief information officer or your CISO. And that really has opened up a lot of dialogue between IT and OT. And now it's interesting, FMs who do report up to the CIO, it's like, okay, I've got friends now in IT and they're helping me look at some of these agreements. And because software is a large part of operational technology, FMs may not have a lot of experience with software contracts and agreements and who should be doing what. So we encourage you to really create that bond or that connection between IO and be that advocate for, we want to make sure that the facility is safe and the people are safe. So let's get together. If we go to the next slide, there's some contact information here for our panelists, and we are going to spend our last few minutes with some Q&A, but we wanted this to be here. Also to remind you that if you've registered for the webinar, you've come in and you're watching it, we will be able to send you a follow-up email that will have this presentation along with some additional informative slides, as well as, of course, their individual contact information. If you have information for IFMA for training, it's at corporateconnections@ifma.org. That's the email address that you're going to want. And I'm going to invite, real quick before we go into Q&A, Starlin to pop back in. And Starlin, we've got some other good news.
We do have some great good news. And by the way, that was an amazing webinar. I really enjoyed listening to all of the insights you guys have. I hope people come away with a lot more awareness of the possibilities and the things that as facility managers, we have control of and need to be thinking about. So I wanted to go ahead and share, we have a little bit of a gift for those who have joined us today. We have some savings codes. So we actually have our normal $50 off or $100 off. So $50 off any of the singular competency courses or essentials of facility management series. These are trainings that IFMA offers. And then we also have credential bundles as well. We have $100 off here as well. You'll see Protect FM FM 50 and Protect FM 100 listed on the screen as the discount codes. But also we have Protect FM 25 for a special $25 off IFMA's cybersecurity course that the team went over here just a few minutes ago. This is a special code. We don't offer this every single time, but we really wanted to make this special for you guys that joined today. And if this is something that you're wanting to become more educated on, please take advantage of this savings code. And then I want to go ahead and hand it back to the team here. We are wrapping up now, so please, if you haven't asked any questions in the comments, please feel free to share them now. If we don't get to them in this Q&A, please feel free to reach out to us at corporateconnections@ifma.org, and we will get you connected appropriately.
Thank you, Starlin. I know that cybersecurity, there's a lot of different courses being offered, but for the panel, is there any kind of master degree programs that you're aware of?
Yeah, from a certification, as you look at the building systems, there's ISA 62443, which is the gold standard for industrial control systems, and it's the basis of what we've built. But that becomes much more sophisticated to do, much deeper dive in the industrial control systems, what we call Industry 2.0 systems.
Okay, great. Another question that we have here, oh, I'm sorry, let me just pop that back up. From cybersecurity to extra super advanced AI breaches on facilities, is it more challenges or isn't it? I think he's just wondering, is it becoming more sophisticated maybe?
I have an opinion.
Yeah.
There's so much, it's a target-rich environment out there right now at very low levels. I mean, you can get to this stuff fairly easily. I'm not discounting the question. There are some AIs out there that don't have the constraints that the good AI has. But really, I mean, there's easy pickings right now. You don't have to do much.
Yeah, and what let me add in there, right? The layers of protection, as Fred mentioned, these ransomware and bad actors are business people. The harder you make it to get into your systems, they're going to move on to somewhere else, right? It's no different than leaving the cars on this, your keys on the seat of the car versus locking it, and so having the layers of protection. But yeah, AI is a friend and a foe. Right. So yes.
Can I add in real quick though? Is also as you have sensors, AI is able to run awareness on anomalies.
Okay? Yes.
So that's the positive of this, right? So that you can have it set for temperature, for any system. So within certain thresholds. And so when it exceeds those thresholds on either side, it will then give you an alarm so that you can look at it and say, no, it's just a variation, or you can understand the causality of it. If not, then you can look into it. So you can leverage AI for good to be able to take all of these sensors, and as they're connected, so you still want the enclave that protects the data and external infiltration there, but you can use it to be able to monitor your systems in a way that you could not before.
Yeah, and another way to say that is every single functional system has a heartbeat. It pushes data one way. It's when that heartbeat changes that becomes the anomaly that you want to reach out and try to understand. I mean, it happened with, I think we told the story of the casino that was attacked through a thermometer in a fish tank. Right, if they had that type of run, right? So there was an exfiltration where they used a Wi-Fi thermometer in a fish tank, but if they were running AI to say, okay, the data that moves from this system to another system moves this way, if it changes, that's when I want the alert.
Yes, exactly.
And so using AI for that. This next question is, what are your thoughts on protecting data sets and ensuring privacy and compliance with regulations at facilities in a digital world? So maybe more regulatory as it relates to facilities. Is that a possibility? Do you guys see that happening?
We do, right? You mentioned before some of the SEC requirements as it's, any breaches that have to be responded to in Sarbanes-Oxley and other things. Don't look at those as siloed. the data that you collect from the assessment piece can also be used in those reporting as well as your insurance reporting and profiles.
Excellent. I'm just looking through to see if there's another question that we have. Um, we're seeing some great comments. Um, and this is exactly what we hope to achieve by partnering together, is to bring the awareness of what's happening. And Stacy, you mentioned before, it can be very scary, but there is an answer out there, and it's being aware, it's creating a plan. What do you do? Who do you contact? I really encourage you to please look for ways to prepare your facilities, prepare the people in it, because they business continuity can really be impacted if this becomes an issue. I like the idea of don't leave your keys or your door open. That's only inviting people to come in. So you want to make sure that this is as secure as you do with physically with your building. You want to make sure it is secure digitally. So I'd like to do just last thoughts if there's a piece of advice or something that you want to leave our viewers with. And I'm going to start with Fred.
So 95% of the assessments I've done, people have felt that they didn't have any holes, and I always find them. So be aware of what exposure level you have. The only way to do that is to take a look at the systems from the network side of things looking out.
Thank you. EJ.
I would say as we look at this interconnected organizational world, there are so many suppliers that the facility managers lean on. Push down on them to make sure that they have the appropriate policies and things in place within their organizations.
That's great advice, because there are a lot that FMs rely on
Hmm.
for everything from life and safety systems through electrical building management systems and beyond. Stacy, kind of looking at what Fred and EJ said, I know you've got some unique perspectives with your clients and the work that you do with BCS. What would you like to leave our folks with?
Well, for those that didn't get the QR code, you can always go to www.buildingcybersecurity.org and then get the checklist. And I think reading through that, what we're trying to do is start conversations. And yes, it's at the C-suite, but it's at the facility manager level and everything in between. We're trying to promote conversations, and it walks you through everything from roles and responsibilities, asset inventory, risk management approaches. It can guide you. And even if you think that you're relatively sophisticated in your construct for your organization, maybe there are gaps or things that can be improved or upgraded. So we encourage everyone, it's free. There's no obligation or anything like that. What we're trying to do is get people to have a conversation about the convergence between the IT and the OT together, so that you can be successful in your roles and continue your learning process to take advantage of technology for good. So if you're going to be connected, be protected.
Thank you. And I'll leave this with those same steps. So for IFMA members, and if you're not an IFMA member, you can still access some of our content on IFMA's Knowledge Library. We have all of those 16 steps in a podcast format, so you can listen. If everybody takes in information different ways, we're trying to put that out there in all of the ways. So please educate yourselves, be prepared, reach out to us at corporateconnections@ifma.org if you have any additional questions, or if there's something that you would like for us to focus on next. Professional development takes so many different forms. It's not just learning from a book, it's learning from one another. From IFMA, thank you so much, BCS, Stacy, EJ, Fred. It has been enlightening, and I've really enjoyed diving deep into this topic with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thanks, everybody.